Commissioners, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon. We're going to call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency to order at 3:05 p.m. And like I said, the chairman is on his way, so as soon as he comes, he'll take over running the meeting. Are there any agenda modifications?
No, sir. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, just for the benefit, just walk through kind of the agenda. I admit it's a little light. I just want to sort of speak to that if I could.
Okay.
So as occurs from time to time, we will adhere to every one of the scheduled meetings that you have. Today was specified to be an infrastructure-only meeting, and there really were not agenda materials requiring IA board action beyond what you have before you. But because of the conversation at the last meeting, we thought it prudent to forward what we have. So what do we have? You have your standard receipt and file, you have your quarterly report, and of course, Autumn's here to answer any questions that you may have on the ongoing program of work and how we're moving forward with that. You had asked at the last meeting for an informational item to cover the history of Blueprint and of the Department of Place. That is provided to you. We do not have a presentation on it, but Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we're happy to answer any questions whenever during the meeting you want to do that, or if you want to do that. Really, the one item that you do have is under consent, and it's approval of minutes. That's a little bit different than what's the norm, but it's all laid out in accordance with your agenda policy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have and turn it back to you to walk through the meeting.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any speakers on consent?
I think the next item, Mr. Chairman, we've just gotten through agenda modifications, would be this first citizens to be heard.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Curtis. All right. Let me go ahead and start with that part then.
Okay.
We have Max Epstein via WebEx.
Name and address for the record, please, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, Commissioners. This is Epstein, 1001 San Luis Road. I was just curious how these infrastructure meetings were going to work since there aren't really any updates. I'm concerned about the Capital Cascades 4 project that seems to be moving ahead. There was supposed to be a white paper, and I'd like to see some discussion on what we can do with this project before it gets into the later stages. And if you look at the timeline, it shows that right-of-way acquisition is supposed to be starting in second quarter, which is now. So especially since federal dollars were taken in this project, there are also requirements for noticing people if their land is even possibly going to be taken. So I'd like to get an update on that project and maybe some public outreach, because I also have not seen that. This is a time for us to really dig in and find any issues and make the projects good before they get into the end stages. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker?
That's our final speaker.
I thought you said we had one speaker in person. No?
We do have one speaker in person, but not for this item.
Okay. Thank you. So we're on consent now, correct?
Move consent.
Next is actually section 3, which is informational items and presentations. We do not have any presentations to give. Mr. Chair, I would just ask if anyone asked to speak on this item, if there's any speaker cards.
I do have one speaker. Our speaker is Stanley Dozier.
Okay. Name and address for
Mr.
the record,
Dozier,
please,
name and
sir.
address for the record, please.
Did something happen that we don't know about?
No, sir. We're going to leave that to Mr. Sims.
Well, I thought I would just come up with an element of surprise and get your attention, and I think all of that worked. My wife knows about it, so it's cool. You understand what I mean? So, but when I'm not Stanley Dozier, I'm Sheriff Walt McNeil. I take on a lot of entities whenever it's comfortable. So my name is Stanley Sims. I'm at 1320 Avondale Way. So good to be among you guys once again. I'm here today about community engagement, and I've got to alter my comments in order to respect the agenda, because this is about infrastructure. But I want to say, when we're talking about engagement, Black minority businesses are still an afterthought when it comes to OEV. We are an afterthought. If we're not then an afterthought, then we are one of the cargos on the train. We've never been the engine. Never been the engine. But yet these projects are in our community. But the tags that are registered when they're doing the work, they don't look like you and I. And then I get developers telling me that, Mr. Sims, it's not even local white boys. Sometimes it's out-of-state white boys that beats us out. These type processes makes it hard for us to engage when the fields are not level. We need words to become deeds. Your last meeting gave staff clear direction that you wanted to see minority businesses at the head and not the tail. Please re-emphasize that in this infrastructure meeting as well. Thank you for your time. You see, I did that when I'm Dozier, I finish early.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Any more speakers?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Max Epstein via WebEx.
All right. Name and address for the record, please, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Sure, 1001 San Luis Road. This was actually supposed to be for the informational place item, so I might as well just say it now. But I would like to bring your attention to the fact that the IMC, according to Blueprint, is not subject to sunshine or public records requests. This change was made in 2016 in the interlocal agreement that eliminated the requirement for quarterly public meetings. I know that the item talks about fairness and transparency and all sorts of things like that, but that's a big issue when there are tens of millions of dollars in contracts and all sorts of other things going through that body that are supposedly not subject to public record. I would recommend that the county and city attorneys take a look at this and also potentially hire an outside counsel to see whether or not this is actually the case, that they are not as a board required to be under the sunshine. That can cause a lot of legal issues if there is a sunshine violation here. So if you want to actually have this transparency, that the interlocal agreement should be amended back to having quarterly public meetings so we can actually understand how agenda items get to the Blueprint board and how all of these contracts are handled. That's a pretty big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more speakers?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're on consent now, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion to approve? Yes.
Before we move to consent, I would ask then if the council could address that issue. We also did get a letter from Peter Butzine addressing that very issue.
Council?
Thank you, Commissioner. Definitely, I would like to clarify some of the comments that were made. First of all, the IMC is not a board or commission within the meaning of the Sunshine Law. With that said, they are absolutely compliant with the requirements of public records. We have IMC memos for all of the actions and functions and duties and decisions that the IMC makes. We absolutely have those available for someone who makes a request for those public records. One of the things to consider here is that for the last 20 years, the IMC, which is the county administrator and the city manager, have been the joint administrators or managers for Blueprint. And that is spelled out clearly in your interlocal agreement. They have specific duties. This board has not delegated duties to the IMC that you should directly control. In other words, for example, if you were to delegate certain actions that is proper and normal for the IA board to do, and you told the IMC to do that, that would be a delegation that would have to comply with the Sunshine Law. That's not the case here. The IMC has specific duties and functions as managers of Blueprint, and they've had that for the last 20 years. They've been the governing structure for this agency, and there's never been an issue regarding their not being in compliance with the law with what they do. Another thing I want to clarify that Mr. Epstein mentioned, he mentioned quarterly public meetings. There is a reference in the original interlocal agreement regarding quarterly meetings. Those, in my opinion, were staff meetings. There were no public meetings that were had at one point and then discontinued in 2016. So I definitely want to clarify that and make sure that that's not twisted in any particular way. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any remaining questions that you have. But the bottom line is there's no gray area here. The IMC is in compliance with public records law, with applicable Florida statutes. They're not a board or commission under the Sunshine Law, and they weren't created to be such. They were created to manage the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency, one person representing the county and the other representing the city.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see, though, where there could have been some confusion there. What I ask is that we clarify that, and that, I mean, it's IMC. You know, I mean, to me, I understood it to be the same thing. It's a managerial thing for the city manager and the county administrator, but it's not a board. They're just simply managing the IA director or place director, correct?
The name is probably not the best choice, right?
Yes.
IMC, Intergovernmental Management Committee.
Yes.
But they're not an advisory committee. They're not a board. They're not within the meaning of the Sunshine Law. That's the key here.
Right.
What they do, what those two individuals do, is manage the director of place, who manages the employees and the actions of Blueprint. And they do that on a day-to-day basis. They're not doing they're not stepping in the shoes of the IA board. They're not the alter ego of the IA board. They have specific delineated functions in the interlocal agreement that was created by the city and also created by the county.
Understood. Thank you. Now, we won't consent.
No, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have questions.
Okay.
So I don't want to move on from this item because this is listed before consent.
So the way I understand things to work is we can ask questions on the item now. Post consent, we have citizens to be heard, and then, because we have no general business, and then direct the discussion. But no action can be taken. So my question to you all as a board, do you want to have the conversation now, or do you want to have it during direct discussion when some action can take place? And I could do it either way.
I'm comfortable moving on, taking consent, as long as there will be time
Yes.
to ask my questions.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Of course. Is there a motion to approve consent?
Second.
Motion been made by Mayor Daley, seconded by Commissioner Williams-Cox. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Move now to general business. There's no general business, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any citizens to be heard?
Any citizens be heard that haven't been heard?
No, sir.
All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with Commissioner Porter and her questions, and we're in now director discussion items. Commissioner Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the agenda item. It was incredibly informative, especially for someone like me who has not been around as long. As I see it, you know, with the discussion that we had at our last meeting, and frankly, with some of the information I've received since then, there are really two separate issues that we're talking about here. One is about public control and accountability, and the other is about sunshine. And originally, my concern was primarily about public control and accountability. But receiving this letter, having other discussions, I have questions about that too. Some of these questions are, you know, may be to the members of the IMC. I don't know if you want to stay there or join us here. It's up to you. The first thing I want to say is that is what we just heard is not what I have heard from our city attorney or from other attorneys who have opinions on this matter. But I do have a couple of questions. So there's a lot that is involved in Blueprint in place. So some clarifying questions, and I have several, and you can just keep it to yes or no, just so we're moving through them quickly. Is the technical coordinating committee subject to sunshine? Just yes or no?
I'm not going to give a yes or no. I'm not going to do that.
Why not?
Because it leaves out a lot of critical information for the public and also for this board. So TCC, their bylaws, if you've read their bylaws, it specifically says that it's not intended to be under the sunshine.
Okay, that's my answer.
No, that's not the full answer. It's comprised of staff, okay? They don't vote. They don't vote at all. Their duty is to advise the blueprint director, and the blueprint director takes that.
Can you speak into the mic, Madam Attorney?
So the answer to that is no, but you need that other information to understand.
Move close to the mic.
What's going on? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I get one.
Okay, is the Citizen Advisory Board subject to sunshine?
Yes.
Okay. And what actions require the Citizen Advisory Board be subject to sunshine?
What do you mean by what action?
Why is it under sunshine? What about it?
They are an advisory group. They are not a management group, a team similar to the IMC. So that's the difference right there. They are specifically in the interlocal agreement set up as an advisory group to give recommendations to the IA board.
Okay, so does the IMC not make recommendations to the IA board?
They do make recommendations. They do make recommendations, but you have to look at this in total. You can't look at it as, well, they're giving recommendations, CAC's giving recommendations, so therefore they ought to be on the same level. That's not how you should look at it. What you should consider is how they are structured and how they have been structured for over 20 years from what the city and county put together in the interlocal agreement. All of the interlocal agreements, if you read them all, they are a governing management entity, if you wouldn't even say entity, co-executives who manage Blueprint. That's different. The CAC does not have management control over individual staff.
I understand.
The IMC does.
Okay.
They don't look at all of our different operations on a day-to-day basis. The IMC does.
Okay.
And their
So may
staff as well. We're not paying the CAC to do work. They're not staff. They don't work for the city and the county.
Okay.
But the IMC members do. So it's important to see this in context and not take out bits and pieces to say that there's an issue here. You can't compare the two.
Well,
So
I clearly think that we can.
I want to give you a full answer.
I appreciate it. I would really like the ability to ask my questions
I'm not
without
stopping
being
you, Commissioner,
accused
from asking
of
your question.
misinterpreting. You're not the only one who has an opinion about this. we received a letter from people who are attorneys, who are experienced in this, who the Citizens Ethics Group, they said that, however, that same group is not exempt from the Sunshine Law when it formulates and presents recommendations or when it is transacting public business under authority delegated to it. Did you read the letter?
I did.
Okay, and how would you respond?
The key word there is delegate, and I explained that just a few minutes ago. So even the cases, legal cases, the court cases that found that there was a violation of Sunshine Law describe what delegation is. So when you delegate, if this body were to delegate, that means that they're giving to others powers and authority that they supposedly should exercise, that they ordinarily and under normal conditions would exercise. That's not the case here.
Okay, so.
The IMC has their own specific functions and duties as managers.
Okay, so I want to read from the September 27th, 2021 meeting, the meeting minutes, which say, Commissioner Maddox questioned Blueprint Legal Counsel on the process for adding new projects to the list, which include the supermajority vote by the IA board. Susan Dawson confirmed that the substantial amendment process, including review by the Technical Coordinating Committee and Citizens Advisory Committee, approval by the Intergovernmental Management Committee, 2 public hearings, and a supermajority vote of the IA board. Is that correct?
That language comes directly out of the Section 10 of the interlocal agreement, your current interlocal agreement.
Okay, so is it, if the IMC did not approve a substantial amendment, would it not come back to this body for a supermajority vote?
Repeat that.
If the IMC did not approve a substantial amendment, would it not come back to the IA board for a vote?
It could. I think what's key here is the recommendation. So if there was a recommendation that the substantial amendment not be had, this board has authority over that. You have approval or disapproval authority, and you can go in another direction. So the IMC is not doing anything that is policy-driven. It's not making policy. It is the IA board that does that, and the IMC is simply here to manage this agency and to implement the policy of this board, period.
So if a member, have we ever, I'm curious what these IMC meetings even look like.
There have been no IMC meetings. There's memoranda.
Okay, so how do they make decisions? I mean, don't they talk?
They have the ability to talk. I'm not aware of any specific meetings in my tenure here.
Okay.
But between the two.
Do you read each other's minds? I mean, I assume you're speaking to each other.
Commissioner, there are memoranda that staff prepares, and that goes to the county, then it's circulated to the city, and they look at it to make sure that staff has complied with the policies that you have approved, including, for example, the MWSBE policy when it comes to procurement-related matters. And once things looks like there's, you can check the box, staff has looked at this, staff has looked at that, and there is budget authority for it, then that is signed off by the county administrator and the city manager.
Okay.
Once that's signed off, then we go forth with whatever the action is that needs to be taken. So it's a check on staff when they put together or when they review the IMC memo that staff prepares to inform them and give them the information they need to do their jobs as managers.
Okay. This item stresses the importance of transparency-inducing entities. Did this item go before the Blueprint Citizen Advisory Committee?
It's informational item? No.
Okay. Did it go before the IMC?
So let me talk a little bit, if I can, about just sort of the development of an agenda. So similar in, let's say, in city government, you have staff that does various and sundry things. When there is a policy matter that is to go before the city commission. It will elevate up the chain, in this case, to the city manager for review. And you have different reviews up the chain of command, and the agenda item gets worked on, all by staff, all building towards a recommendation or some action that could be taken by the appropriate authority, which is in this scenario, the city commission. The same is true on the county side, just with the county administrator. The same is true here through my office. The only difference is I have two executives who have been charged with the management of the day-to-day of Blueprint. And so I will elevate those agenda materials, and I'm coming to what you asked. I will elevate those agenda materials to both of them, usually through Ken Morris, who I'm assigned to day-to-day on the county side, Wayne Tedder on the city side. And so this informational item and this IA board packet, in accordance with your policy, went right along that same process that's been utilized, as Susan indicated, for, largely over the last 20 years, and the entirety of my tenure as place director, and I believe the entirety of any place director. There's only been one before me, and that was Wayne Tedder.
Okay, thank you. So, and I'm going to be wrapping up soon. So the bottom of this item says there's a staff recommendation. Which staff is recommending that?
So any recommendation, any staff recommendation on any item that you would receive before this body starts with the two individuals there at the IMC, would include myself and anybody else who's named in your agenda material. Because we're staff.
Okay, so, we've got, I hear what you're saying, and I read all 300 pages of the agenda item. This, to me, is like we're doing a bunch of government speak and gymnastics. I find this extremely concerning personally. I don't think it's an issue that I would be willing to take a bet on. It wouldn't be illegal for us to make it under sunshine. I understand the difference between management, but I do see there being a larger role than simply management. And that is not even to mention, and I won't even talk about this today, the HR concerns and accountability concerns that have been raised recently with the function of Blueprint. I was looking at even some of, the lack of the meetings, the evaluation process of the executive director, and I won't even really go into that, like I said. But having sat on the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls and having to endure sunshine under that, and the comparison between the power that that board has, or most of these advisory groups have, I know I'm not an attorney, but I don't think I need to be an attorney. I was elected to exercise my judgment, to listen to constituents, people who are attorneys, including at our own city government, have concerns about this. So I would definitely, I don't see really what we lose by making this open to the public to understand how these decisions are being made. And I think all of us here understand the burdens sometimes of sunshine and the way it can even feel like it's making things less efficient. I wish I could just talk to other commissioners about certain issues. I think we might have better relationships if we were able to do that. But those are just my thoughts. I'm concerned about this, and I don't think it's a wise position for us to take legally or in building the public's trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Porter. I think, like I spoke before, I think we kind of create our own problem by calling it a committee. While you guys were explaining it, I thought no more of it than in our respective city, county governments as receiving recommendation coming from staff. And the head of those governments having to sign off on different things because they are the head of those governments. But when you put the word committee behind it, it gives it, I guess, a different thing. But I mean, nobody probably thought that we'd be having this conversation, but it is a bit confusing. I don't know if we think about changing the name or whatever, but to me, it sounds like there's no more but management, and any recommendation that comes from any person who's on our staff, just like it would in our regular business on the city or county side, will come up through our respective administrators for the final sign off to say that that's what staff is recommending. So semantics, but I can understand where there would be some confusion there. I do have one more speaker. We're past speakers to be heard, but if the board would give me the prerogative to do so, I'd like to have that speaker speak.
Stanley Sims.
Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Come back to me. I'm at Stanley Sims, 1320 Avondale Way. Process. I'm concerned, Commissioner Manners. I read your op-ed. You upset? How about when the attorney, in my opinion, takes an oath of ethics to fairly process? I believe it's her job is to do what's ethically sound for this body, but as well as me as a constituent. This body directed staff to assist all of those parties in my proposal that was turned down. The attorney looked for reasons not to help me, and those reasons was not suffice. She said the reason she didn't help IC2U is because we weren't an LLC. I said, well, you helped Chicks with a Bag. They weren't an LLC. They reached out to them. I said, you didn't help Help. Help was a 501c3. I wasn't treated like Commissioner Madlow asked them to treat me during the technical assistance process to afford me the same courtesy as FSU. I had to discuss my personal business out in the lobby after she stood me up on the first one. Process. Commissioner Madlow specifically asked, and Commissioner Cummings specifically emphasized that when you adopted a process, because beforehand it was management that dictated that now I am the only black that has submitted a process in all of this. And then the night you voted, you gave $20 million to dope, 3.7 million to cats and dogs, and turned down a black community for 1.2. And I still don't have a clear direction because she is requiring that I go up under the new statute.
30 seconds.
But when you have already made a decree of general knowledge for me to be grandfathered in on the second part, and not only, Commissioner Maddox, am I trying to move forward. Under whatever process you get, I don't feel no ways tied. You understand that? I don't feel no ways tied.
Thank you, sir. Any more speakers?
No, sir.
Back to commissioner discussion. I guess I'll start with Commissioner Myers to come around. I don't think there's anybody. I'm sorry, Commissioner, sorry. The Vice Chair, and then I'll go to Commissioner Prater. I was going to let everybody just get their words.
Yeah, just two things very quickly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I had some concern, Mr. Chairman, about our city attorney being referenced today without her not being here to address that. Typically, I can tell you whenever issues come up that our city attorney is asked to give us advice on, she shares that with all of us. I did not get that, so I just had a concern with that, Commissioner Porter, referencing her without her being here to substantiate that. But then the other point is I have full faith and confidence in our council to advise this board. I've been here for 6 years, for the length of time that she has been here as our council, and I have full faith and confidence in the advice that she gives us. Now, when we get to the point where we take the advice of outside attorneys and counsel, then we need to substitute her with those individuals. That's what she is paid for. That's what she does for us. We can certainly, I read the letter that we got from Peter Butzine and the ethics group, and that's why I asked the question that I did, and I was satisfied with the responses that we got from our attorney, who we hired to advise us as a board. And so I want to make sure that it's completely understood that I have full faith and confidence in the advice and counsel that our attorney gives us as a board.
Commissioner Broughton.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think today is an inquest of the county or rather the Blueprint's attorney at all. She always acquits herself admirably, capably. The issue that Mr. Sims brought up about a citizen's understanding of the process, where they stand, what step 1, 2, 3, what happens for an appeal, an appellate process, when denied, when turned down. And is all of this merely a gray area? Is it merely for one person, be it our attorney for this board, or for one or two other persons designated? And when this body does not see the requests that are submitted by citizens, are all requests submitted treated equally? And if there's a filtering process, what lens? Is it a 20, an 18? I'm not that optically, I miss eye school, eye doctor school. But what do you look through to evaluate what meets a substantial enough test to come up to this board? That's foggy. I ain't clear about it. Mr. Sims is not clear about it. We've spent time previously with respect to what is due process. If a citizen believes that they shouldn't be at the door duking it out with our attorney or anybody else, when does this board get to hear projects from the community? That's the clarity which we need. Now, the spirit of Commissioner Porter's seemingly ask here with respect to our processes, I think that there has been enough stuff occurring, dynamics on our board, factions of the community, just plain from everybody from the FBI to the court, everybody have looked at our stuff. And our stuff has not been exactly from members in the way you juke the system, dazzle the system. Some can backdoor it. We recognize now that some of our staff is vulnerable. We recognize now that some commissioners may well deploy or employ arm twisting. But some people in this community can get things, relatively quick, and they understand something that Mr. Sims and lay people don't. I'm not sure what the byproduct of which of us is the go-to. Are we equal? Is it a matter of which commissioner brings it up, which district commissioner it comes from? Those are legitimate questions. And I think that the timeout that we're pausing to weigh and we can't duck our heads under the sand with pretense that we don't know what order is talking about or Sims. It happens that some of our staff are actually have been questioning. And the thing about biology, I'm not a biologist, but it's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, members, that the crab is a creature. When it can't find food externally, it will eat of itself internally. And it's my hope that we're not crabs. And if there is not enough external in the work that is to be done, that from starvation and from our own sense of impoverished vision, that we're a very good board, we're very good people, we have exquisite stuff. And when you look at this table, players, the actors, the actresses, we're phenomenal. I am hoping that we don't get off track and devolve into eating ourselves internally. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, your leadership, how we check ourselves, us as commissioners, how we play, how we text, what we text about, what we say about one another. I can't control all that, Mr. Chairman. I don't know about all that. When we take a vote, are we subject to the tyranny of are we be pushed around, dogged around? Every time we take a vote, have we done something wrong if we're not on the right? All of those are real dynamics. They've developed and become, they're not abstract any longer. They're very concrete. And when text messages come forward to impugn, to denigrate members for our backgrounds, what we have evolved to be personalities at this table, I'm just hoping we can rise above that. It's hard to trust and go forward from the professional evaluation when we recognize that interpersonally there's just no respect and there's a willful disregard for the equal regard for each other. The process, the finished product, that is, so what I'm telling y'all is that all of us need to pull up, all of us. We've got a great report in here, the things that we've done. But we're not committed. It don't matter what the rules are. You can jive any set of rules. Legislative rules, I mean, the rules can be gotten around. And I've stayed in law school just long enough, members, to have just enough of a grasp to be dangerously ignorant to say that rules can be gotten around. But it's from the heart that we want to do what's right, that we want to regard each other. It's from the heart that we're desiring to achieve something and spend the public's money, making sure equitably, that geographically, that we're putting money in all communities as best we can. And with the overlay of a WMBE, that we're spending money with all pockets of the community. If it's not in our heart, the rules and the sheet of paper it can be gotten around. So today I confess a willingness to step forward to be a new member, renewed, rekindled in the desire to see the blueprint move forward. I am guilty of being the lone member at this table who have been here for the duration of IA. I've probably attended more meetings than anybody in this room, with the exception of Vince Long and perhaps Wayne Tedder. But I'm willing, however, to start and make a new commitment and to say to all of you all that first, I'm just sorry if I have hurt anybody, if said anything, done anything, if not come to the table with a clean enough heart, that my care for the projects that we do, if I didn't put that first, I apologize. But I think that what we need is a restart a new beginning in our spirits and our hearts of wanting to expend the public's money in a way that it benefits our community. We're big enough, we're capable enough. We have a Super Bowl team, but we don't want to implode and have the wide receiver take his jersey off and quit the team in the middle of the third quarter. We got the right stuff here, y'all. And I'm asking you, as the oldest member serving at this table, that I feel some duty of historic nature, aware of the tedious contemplations of many people's minds to get us here at this point. And on behalf of all of those people who have sat here from the giddy up to right now, I feel I'm best capable to say to you, let's not get caught out in the weeds, y'all. Everybody, we need to pull up and carry forth what has been a good idea. It has wrought a lot of good. And if from my heart, I'm willing to rejoin this team, say, forgive me for whatever I've done where I've fallen short. But I think y'all, from the heart, everybody at this table ought to re-up, let's start anew. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing the oldest serving member here through many meetings.
Longest.
Huh?
Longest.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say. Those things right there just come from the heart, and we cannot blow up the good that we have established. And I think all of us big enough, everybody, y'all. So let's pull our community forward. And that's probably the last time I ever make a statement like that at this table, because I don't like to make these kind of statements. I like other stuff. I don't like being the team captain. But you are, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Mr. Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those words of wisdom, Commissioner Proctor. I'll start. I'm glad we have the opportunity to have this discussion. I think there was a lot of informative information in the agenda item. I think the board and the public probably need more clarification on what the IMC is and what the IMC does, because when we get asked questions as elected officials and we try to explain it, it gets very, very complicated. So I just want to take a minute and help break it down and get the answers for the public. So just to start with, Mr. Pingree, can you just give an overview of the working relationship between the IMC and your role as Director of Place, what that is on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
The simple version, and it's all laid out in the material, is that most people who have a job, including all the city employees and all the county employees, have a boss, have a supervisor, a superior, and a subordinate relationship. I have two. That's the quickest example that I can give. Your key executives for the intergovernmental agency, which doesn't include planning, which is included in place, but it does include Blueprint Infrastructure and the Office of Economic Vitality. You have a two-person executives, and those two individuals are my boss.
And what
We've called them the IMC.
Thank you. And so what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? You're in constant communication with them, taking direction from them?
Well, actually, since I started on February the 15th, 2016, and this is all laid out in the material as well, in addition to your interlocal agreements, they've assigned the day-to-day oversight for my position to an assistant city manager and an assistant county administrator, respectively. So I'll communicate mostly with those two individuals.
Okay, so while the IMC is your boss, they've delegated their boss authority to other people to be your boss. Would that be accurate?
No different in my mind than if you look at the interlocal agreement for the place director, all the various staff within place is subordinate to me, but there's levels of that, or there's levels underneath Reese in the city, and there's levels underneath Vince in the county.
If I could just supplement Mr. Pingree's response. The IA, the interlocal agreement specifically says that the director of place is responsive to the IMC or their designees. It does specifically say that
What I was trying.
Okay.
in the agreement.
Okay, thank you. And again, just trying to break it down for the public. So the top level of the agency, the interlocal board, that's us sitting here. The IMC under that, probably not discuss another layer of that, assistant county administrators serving in the role, and then you're under them. Is that a hierarchy that is how it operates?
In simple terms, yes.
Okay. And so the real day-to-day administrative functions, you're not constantly in contact with the IMC taking direction on a day-to-day basis for certain items?
I'm in constant contact with my team. I'm in mostly daily contact with my supervisors and periodic communication with the IMC.
Okay. Have you ever encountered a situation where I'm a small business owner, I have one partner, I can recognize the challenges of having two bosses. It's a struggle, it's a challenge. I think, I would imagine it's a challenge for you, I won't speak for you, but I know when we have issues, it's very important for us to come together and give one clear direction to our staff. Have you ever encountered an issue where your two bosses disagreed?
I think that the real opportunity and the real story that is Blueprint, and then beyond that, that is Place, is the alignment that exists. I'm coming to your question.
I appreciate your enthusiasm for Blueprint, but the question is pretty direct.
To give you my perspective in answering your question.
Sure.
We are one of the few entities across the state, if not the only, that has the alignment. That's one thing, but the integration within a city and county government to be able to do things faster, more efficiently, at less cost. Your question is it challenging to have two bosses versus one boss? Yes, it's simple mathematics.
My point is, have you ever encountered a situation where your bosses have disagreed?
I've encountered situations where my subordinate employees have disagreed. I've encountered
And in that scenario, but in that scenario, who do you
disagreed.
take direction from, the county administrator or the city manager?
Well, if you look at the creation of my position, it takes two of them to hire me, but one to fire me. In my mind, that means I need to have clear direction from both on any issue.
Okay. So they would have to get together and come to some sort of consensus between the two of them to give you one set of directions, or do they leave you in a position where you have to decide whose direction to follow?
No, usually what I'll do is I'll work on solution options that will work the best and elevate that up.
Okay. So following the agenda item, it says the IMC will jointly administer the program and make recommendations on policy to Blueprint 2000 Governing Board and carry out the long-range direction. What recommendations is that referring to that the IMC makes? Is that policy recommendations?
I want to clarify even back what I just said. Their job as my supervisor is to implement the policy will of the board, period. That's never a muddied line, and I know that the attorney spoke to that in her comments previously.
So you're saying
Policy, if you will.
Okay.
Policy recommendations that come up to you in these agenda items, and I can talk about how we develop the agenda and how we work the agenda material, but it's always elevated to you. That power, that authority, that responsibility is embodied in this governing body, and those agendas, in accordance with the policy that this board approved, are developed by the IMC. They're published 7 days in advance of the meeting. They're here in a public forum for discussion and any action. When that action is taken on everything from what a project would be to a program at OEV or whatever is the case, then it falls back to the IMC and then through me to make sure that we effectuate that efficiently.
So before a recommendation is made to this board, it gets recommended by the IMC?
You will see the IMC on every agenda material that goes before you. You will see it on your draft and proposed budget document. Anything that is elevated to this body, certainly during my tenure, and I know from before, will have the IMC and then other relevant parties, all staff, named on the document with their or our, I should say, analysis and recommendations.
Okay. You mentioned one of the major authorities being the boss, hiring, firing of the director of place. When part of the interlocal agreement speaks to the annual performance reviews being jointly, can you walk us through the process of how that joint review is issued?
Well, usually, and I think this is somewhat common for senior managers in time of the annual review, there's a document, a sort of a draft outline of what an annual performance review would be. Usually, since I've been in this job, I will fill that out, and that's not just common to me. Talk about what I've done, talk about where I see room for improvement, talk about the next year.
Stop for a moment. You complete your own performance review?
No, draft.
Okay. Draft, okay,
No.
okay. Yeah.
And then I elevate
I'm sorry,
that, no.
I'm glad you clarified.
Yeah, then I elevate that up my chain of command to Ken Morris and to Wayne Tedder. They've been the two individuals the entirety of my time. And they will consider that. And they will add, subtract, do whatever they have, and then they will meet with me. Usually those meetings are one-on-one.
Okay, so it's not a joint, they don't jointly review you, they individually tell, okay. I'm not sure if that is consistent with our interlocal agreement to have a joint review, because I would just want to make sure all of our agencies are represented together. Moving on to another statement that caused a little confusion in the agenda item. It says, an agency separate from the city and county clarifies accountability and issues taxpayers that their dollars are properly spent on the projects they voted for in the referendum. What does that mean? It's speaking to, because it's separate from the city and county, it clarifies accountability and issues taxpayers and their dollars are probably spent on the projects. Can you speak to that?
Well, I could handle it in probably a number of different ways. We'll start with just the structure of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. It's a standalone agency. Pardon me. Accordingly, you develop your own budget each year. You do that at a public meeting. You have management controls in place. There is an annual audit that is conducted. It is conducted externally. That is reported back to you. But in addition, as this is local sales taxes and part of city and county, the city has its own annual audit. The city audit local option sales taxes is a component of city's revenues, so they also look at our management controls. Same with the county. When we develop a budget, for example, we have our own budget staff, but we don't develop our budget in isolation. We develop it in concert under, again, the county administrator and the city manager, with all of that, their respective budget offices and their finance offices. So we, as a relatively small organization, have the benefit of the bandwidth of their staff as well. So it's multiple layers of oversight for these kinds of things. Now take it, if I will, a step further. The play structure, the interlocal agreement, the second amended and restated, that didn't just come to this body at a public meeting where citizens could look at it, weigh in. It also goes to a county commission meeting, which is a public meeting where citizens can go and weigh in. It must go to a city commission, et cetera, et cetera. So you literally have all of these different layers. Beyond that, if you look at the establishment, even back to the year 2000, of what should, and I'm looking at Commissioner Richardson, who was on the EECC, what should this new Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency do? There was a discussion about need for enhanced transparency and citizen advisory committees and things of this nature. So that is also, a component of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency and the work that we do.
Thank you. This statement speaks to it being a separate agency as having that accountability, and you spoke to the city and county being under that umbrella, but this agency isn't subject to any city or county policies, isn't that correct?
Well, this agency stands alone. This agency.
Okay. I just don't see how that clarifies increased accountability. So the second part of that same statement in the agenda item says an agency managed under the leadership of county and city chief executives assures optimized, coordinated efficiency in project execution. How so?
I could give you any number of examples, but let me just give you one. And it's, and there's a number of examples, by the way, in the agenda material. And I would say Amazon is the Amazon experience is a phenomenal example of this. So yes, if you look just in isolation of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency, you have OEV, and you have the local incentives that helped achieve that. But back up internal on that same issue. What was one of the first objectives that the company demanded, that they needed? They needed to know that the parcel would work, and they needed to know that the permit could be achieved expeditiously. So one of the first actions that was required was within the place umbrella, where the planning department had to assure alignment of the parcel as it existed with comp plan. So comp plan consistency. All right, so that's all still within place, right? Take it a step beyond that. One of the biggest questions, and it speaks directly to your question, Commissioner, and it speaks to one of the two members of the IMC, they needed to know that they could get a permit quickly. If they could not meet their permitting capabilities, it would not work regardless or irrespective of what the incentive amount would have been. Because I report up to Vince, and all that he has under his domain, the ability to engage DSEM, Barry Wilcox, for those who are on the county side, you will know, he was immediately able to be activated and engaged on that project. But it wasn't just the county. So the other part of the IMC is obviously RESCODE. Another major question that the company had early before there was any, when they were still searching and we were competing, was, okay, how about the ability for power? I mean, it wouldn't have done any good to build the building if day one you throw the switch and the lights don't turn on. So all the ability for the two individual executives to engage was invaluable. Now, could OEV have done its work without that structure? Okay. Would that efficiency have existed? Would that alignment had existed? Would that integration and the benefit of that integration had existed? No, I'm sorry, sir. I would submit to this group it would not exist. It just wouldn't.
I would disagree with that. I think the county administrator and the city manager are professionals that can execute their duties for their respective entities and work in coordination with OEV. It just sounded, those statements back to back just sounded like it's saying, so we can use the city and county when convenient and be more nimble when not. But moving on, so the 2011 changes, that the IMC be the decision-making authority for significant expenditures. Is that not the role of the elected officials, the board?
It certainly is, but I'm not ready to move on from the last. If you look at attachment 5, Commissioner, and you look at the management.
I
this is important.
we have a lot to do. I don't want to. I'd be happy to discuss it in a
Mr.
briefing.
Matlow, will you allow me to answer?
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the management report, which led to the creation of PLACE, yes, no one is besmirching the professional capacity and the intention of the IMC, certainly not somebody who reports to them. But if you look at the findings of a comprehensive analysis, which is provided as attachment number 5, you will see that there was evidence in the old Blueprint model where when city and county staff would go to Blueprint officials at the TCC, they were not adhered to. Why? Because there was autonomy of the executive director of Blueprint at that time where they could take that suggestion or leave it. And what the management review found was largely they'd leave it. We're not leaving any opportunity for efficiency or integration on the table under the current structure, and we haven't done so for 11 years. I appreciate the opportunity to lean in with that comment.
Absolutely. So the decision-making authority for significant expenditures, that spending authority comes from the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and given to the committee. As you recall, I objected, I believe last year, maybe it was the year before, to giving the IMC authority to spend up to $500,000 for so-called competitive projects. That's such a large sum of money when we established a competitive projects fund. Those recommendations, I believe, are made by the competitive project cabinet. Is that cabinet, Sunshine?
Yes.
Okay. And then they forward those recommendations to the IMC, who makes the recommendations to the board. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
The competitive project cabinets, they make their recommendations to the IMC, and then the IMC makes the recommendations to the board.
Depends on the amount. So if it's over 500,000, it comes to the IA board.
Okay.
If it's less than 500,000, the IA board has approved the CPC's policy and procedures, which say that the IMC can move forward on that.
So we delegated our authority for anything that's $500,000 or under to not have to come back to the board?
You did not delegate that authority.
Okay.
That is, through your policy, you specifically defined what their authority is. You did not say, this is our authority, and we want you to deal with it. We want you to handle it. It is split based on the threshold amount. So that's for CPC. And then you have your purchasing policy with the IA board has approved, where the IMC has, their, delineated authority that this board has specifically directed to them that does not conflict with what this board does. I just want to
Thank you.
make sure you're aware of that.
Absolutely. Moving on in the agenda to the staff recommendation, altering the governance and management structure of place would impact the efficiencies gained over the past decade, enlightening the considerable technical and professional resources with the Planning Department OEV blueprint in place. I'm curious how that recommendation is formulated, what management changes or governance changes it's considering, and how that was come about. What specific management changes were considered to make a recommendation that any changes would not be efficient?
You're asking my opinion?
Yes, sir. The staff recommend, it could be the IMC.
I believe that was a conclusion statement that was both reflective of and acknowledging that over the last 20 years, there haven't just been 2 touch points to our structure. There have been a consistent series of improvements made over time at every step to ensure that we are learning from what we're doing right and enacting what we can do better. What it's also a summation of is you have one of the most sophisticated, integrated, and intentional organizations here to do large, generational, and transformational projects with policies and oversight and transparency replete. Can you make changes? Absolutely you can. Could you lose efficiencies by doing it? Efficiencies that you have gained, This body has gained over the last 20 years. Yes, sir, you could. And that's what that statement refers to.
I understand. I just think without any suggestions, it's hard to know what we're analyzing. Moving on, we brought it up, the hiring and firing of the director of the place as one major role of the IMC. The IMC would conduct the interviews. It was reported in the Tallahassee Democrat that your job interview took place at the Brass Tap. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a bar. Was alcohol consumed?
Yeah.
Huh?
Next question.
Was alcohol consumed during the job interview?
My recollection is I was very focused on speaking to my capacity and my competency.
Okay. Did the IMC interview other applicants?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Madam Attorney. Madam Attorney.
Point of, proper order here, under Robert's rules, I can certainly pull it out and point to a section.
Yeah.
But I think these issues are not germane to the information.
We're in director discussion.
Wait.
On point.
Wait, let her finish.
Okay.
They seem to be going in a personal nature.
Absolutely not.
Regarding an event that took place years ago that's not referenced in the informational item.
No.
That deals with, I don't know where it's going. But I would caution the chair that what's going on here in terms of the line of the questioning may be improper.
Mr. Chair, for clarification.
Sorry, Commissioner Matlow, could you explain how this can be germane to the issue?
Yes. Point one, we're under commission sharing of ideas, so we're not germane to a specific item currently. But the larger issue is the structure of the agency, as it was just recommended that efficiencies couldn't be achieved. I'm trying to determine how the current process and interview process is, if it's notably not a sunshine board, how those decisions are made, because I do think efficiencies can be achieved by making this board more transparent and having interviews of people who conduct billion-dollar agencies, have that conducted in the sunshine. So I'm trying to determine how we got to where we are now so I can get to possibly ideas for where we go in the future.
Give me a second. Madam Attorney, we are doing commissioner discussion time. This isn't necessarily on the item. Are we limited to the questions that we can ask, whether it be germane or not, during discussion time?
Mr. Chair, it is certainly your discretion to maintain the line of questioning, the tenor of this meeting. As Commissioner Proctor stated earlier, the nature of the environment, the conversation, the line of questioning, all of that should be focused on the work that this body is about. And issues that go into a personal nature should never be allowed.
Madam Attorney, this is all public record of
Commissioner
they're
Matlow.
conducting a public business, though, a
Commissioner
job
Matlow,
interview.
Are you done, Madam Attorney? Commissioner Matlow, the way I see it, your line of questioning was on something that was involving business that happened a long time ago with the actual entity. The place that the actual interview took place and what happened there, I guess, I mean, if we want to argue the point of that, we could. But what I would like to ask is, if you could move closer to where you want to go with this, as far as, are we going to make a motion? Are you going to make a motion in some way? Or are we just here to try to make the process look like there was something wrong with it?
I'm working towards a motion, but I think, every detail of how, as a public entity, we conduct job interviews, where we conduct job interviews. I mean, it's being implied that I'm inappropriate for asking about the job interview being conducted in the bar. I would submit that it's inappropriate to conduct a job interview in a bar as an elected
I'm not
official.
necessarily applying that. What I'm saying to you is that at some point, and I say this to the whole board, at some point, either we're going to have an agenda item, or we're not going to have an agenda item, or we're going to have to do something with it. So I don't want to get too far into discussion. So there's a repeated discussion, if we do move in that direction, of what happens or how we conduct things. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but as an elected member of this board and this body, it's an imperative for me to have an understanding of how the agency operates. I understand what you're saying. This isn't meant to embarrass anybody. This isn't meant to single anybody out. It's to get to the underlying issue that I have repeatedly said for years now, that there's a lack of accountability and transparency at Blueprint. And I think what I'm speaking to speaks to that very fact and informs the decision that I'd like this board to make.
Mr. Chair.
On point?
Yes, on point, point of order. Since we're in commissioner discussion, the information item that has been presented, can we go ahead and accept that information?
It's not an action item.
I understand it's not an action item, but it's being used in a line of questioning. So if we are going to continue down this line of questioning, at some point, we either need to accept the information that has been provided to us and move on, or if there's a desire to do something else, do that. I think that the public would expect us to be efficient in this meeting, which we're not always efficient. And so I'm just trying to figure out what are we doing? Where are we going?
Commissioner Williams-Cox, I do understand where you're coming from on that, but Madam Attorney, we'd be out of order to make a motion on an information item that has no necessarily, I guess what I'm saying to you is that we're past the item and there was no action to be taken on the item. Now, look, guys, here's where I'm going to go with this. We're all elected, okay? And I understand I have to run an efficient meeting, but at the same time, I also have a responsibility to allow commissioners to ask the questions that they need to ask. I'll ask that we always be respectful of one another, all right? Commissioner Matlow's questions, in my opinion, though they were, and this is just my opinion, though they were, I guess, a little bit different than what we would have asked in the past, I do think that they were on point to IA business. as far as, in commission, Madam Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as, I mean, the firing process of the director is IA business, correct?
But it's not on the agenda.
Ma'am?
The process,
Yes.
in terms of the venue where these individuals met, I'm just used to spending a lot of time in court, but what a judge would always look at is what's relevant. How is that relevant to what we're supposed to be doing here in terms of IA board business? And folks that are watching who are wondering, how is this project proceeding? What's going to happen in my neighborhood?
Right.
Are they really concerned about what happened at a bar so many years ago? I'm sorry I went there, but.
They are.
I understand.
So you know
Let
they
me get
are.
through it.
The focus should be on the business. And as your parliamentarian and your direction several months ago for me to alert you to matters that relate to the function under the rules, under Robert's rules, I think I just have a duty to let you know that it was moving in a direction that was not relevant, that could be quite personal, considering, everything.
Commissioner Matlock, can you move your?
Thank you. I think I can get through it pretty quickly. Though there may be some objections to a few questions, but I can't, but it will be germane to the issues.
I think you kind of know
So
the
back
questions
to
there will be objections to.
Thank
So
you.
Can we kind of get around those? Thank you.
Were there other applicants in interviews for the director of place? Mr. Long, Mr. Good, I don't believe took place in that. It was City Manager Fernandez at the time.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
would you like me to address that question?
please.
I can't recall. I think Ben was the only applicant for that position, and Ben, you can help me out. But I think Ben was the only applicant. I don't recall any reference to any bars, but I'm not sure where that comes from. But my recollection was that the city manager at the time and myself made that assessment of your job candidacy independently and by memo elevated that to the IA or something along those lines. I don't remember all the details associated with it, but that's my memory. Mr. Chairman, could I just, for a moment?
Yes, sir.
And I certainly appreciate that this line of questioning is simply for clarification. But I offer an orientation on Blueprint to all commissioners when they're elected, and that can get pretty extensive. I know the city manager probably does the same thing. And I know that Commissioner Richardson will recall early on this structure that we put together, because there's been a lot said about it. But let me elevate it, if I can, for a minute and give you sort of the big picture, the way sales taxes work and that sort of thing. Generally speaking, the way sales taxes work in Florida is that the county commission is authorized to put a sales tax on the ballot. Florida statutes 212.055 gives you that authority. And what happens is, by state statute, counties split the proceeds with cities that are within the county. And that happens by state statute. Or you can develop an interlocal agreement to do something different. We are the only county, and especially at that time, decades ago now, that ever came up with a structure like this. And I can tell you why. And again, it just may be helpful that this structure was put together. And it leads to some of the questions that have been raised about the IA and other things. This structure was put in place to do projects, again, that cross city and county jurisdictions and that sort of thing. And big projects that require a tremendous amount of organizational focus and resources and alignment that has been mentioned earlier. And that's the only way you can do these projects, by the way. You all know that Blueprint has a handful of employees. Do you really think that they can do the projects that we have before you? They can't. They can do it because they've got the alignment of the city and the county. And Reese and I bring that full.
I appreciate you,
resources.
Mr. Administrator. Mr.
Yeah, we bring
Chair.
those.
I just
we
want to
bring
make sure I'll
those
have
full.
time
Yeah.
since we're.
Yeah, you will.
Okay.
Yeah, we bring those full resources to bear on everything that we do. And that's how we're able to do these projects, simply put. Otherwise, what you would have is the county would simply give the city their proceeds based on their population, and the city would do a list of projects, and the county would do a list of projects. That's how everyone else does this. We did something really different when we put this together. And so going to the IMC, why that matters is what Reese and I do on every agenda is we look at the agenda based on the direction of this board, not based on, we don't decide what agenda items come here, we don't decide what's in the agenda items. Based on this, we say, that when Ben brings a project forward, we say, okay, on that segment of that project, the county will do this. On this segment of the project, the city will do that. On this segment of the project, Blueprint will contact directly for that, and then we're able to do these big, massive projects. That's the level of contemplation that happened. He and I don't need to get together to decide what projects to be done, how they're supposed to be done. When change orders and things like that happen administratively, we sign them. We do those independently. We don't meet to sign change orders and that sort of thing. That is, by the way, based on a lot of engineering reports and other things that are forwarded to us to do that sort of thing. So again, I just wanted to give you that little bit of a background in terms of the bigger picture associated with Blueprint. And of course, you could structure Blueprint all kinds of ways, but you're not going to get what you've got in place right now. So, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. So I think we've established at this point there was one job interview. The hiring authority was County Administrator Vince Long, City Manager at the time, Rick Fernandez. Were any board members of the IA board involved in that decision-making process at all? Mr. Penegry?
Mr. Administrator? I mean, technically, the only reason I asked is
Absolutely none.
because, I mean, Mr. Pingree should know who was involved. Mr. Administrator?
Yeah, absolutely.
There were absolutely no commissioners involved. That's not to say that people didn't say they were involved, but I could tell you there was no commissioners involved in my determination on my side representing the county for that position. Zero, none, never.
Thank you, Mr. County Administrator. I'm not going to ask for a response to this, but quoting really the only public record available of our hiring process has been through the Tallahassee Democrat, because the IMC does not conduct interview in the sunshine, and that was a text message to Scott Maddox saying, I have no doubt and full faith in who made this happen. Let's rock and roll, and thank you. Whether that's related or not, whether that's speaking out of turn, I'm not going to weigh in on that. But to the public, this is the only record they see of how these decisions are made. It looks bad. It looks bad to me. It looks bad to everybody reading the Tallahassee Democrat, and I don't think we can ignore that. I don't think we can ignore it at all. Aside from that question, with the current board, there's no engagement with individual board members about employment of IA staff, Mr. Penegry or Mr. County Administrator, City Manager?
I'm sorry?
There's no employment conversations with individual board members?
No, of course not.
And then the last question, clarification on our former city manager, Rick Fernandez, as we know, left the city of Tallahassee after an ethics complaint, and subsequently went to work for local developers that do have interest in projects and things that come before this board. Is there any coordination between Blueprint staff and former city manager Rick Fernandez on any projects?
What? Ben?
Mr. Chairman, I find this question
Answer the question,
offensive.
please.
No.
Mr. Administrator?
Yeah.
Mr. Administrator? Can you answer the question, please?
I don't even understand the question.
Nick,
I was just asking if there was communications.
I want y'all to understand, this man has questions. I want him to get all his questions answered. Now, he asked, the question is, has there been any coordination between Blueprint and the former city manager who works for a company that does, say it again?
That shows interest in the
That
projects.
shows
and
interest.
That's right.
And he wants to know, has been any coordinator with that, with the former administrator in Blueprint at all? The director has said no. I'm asking Mr. Long the question so he can answer as well. Mr. Administrator?
I've had no coordination or communication with the city manager since he left his position, if that's helpful. But I'm not sure there's a lot.
There's no implications made. I'm just clarification.
I understand.
Sure.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring this in for a landing very, very soon. As in the 2011 agenda recommendation, something that stuck out to me was by continuing independent action through the IA structure, as well as retaining the ability to move rapidly on projects and acquisitions without being hindered by local government procedures and policies. That to me is just a giant red flag. I don't think local procedures and policies hinder the work we do. I think they make us better. That's why we put in place policies to make us transparent and to protect our entities, our individual staff members, our executives, as well as our board members. So, I mean, celebrating the fact that we don't have policy, celebrating the fact that there's no HR agency or policy that directs the Blueprint agency, that we're not, subject to a local ethics board or the inspector general, and seeing that the IMC does not conduct business in the sunshine, and that's based on our attorney's advice is not required. I'm not saying we're doing something wrong, but I'm saying what we know is there's no record of how decisions, the main decisions of the IMC, are being made. Right now, we really have a structure that doesn't provide our elected board of directors to have any input at all to provide oversight or any recourse if there's a staffing decision or something that they take issue with. Personally, to me, having control of $1 billion agency and conducting an interview in a bar is just not okay by me. I don't think working with the Chamber of Commerce to invite private companies to a bar and having our government buy expensive steak dinners and alcohol before they come before city commissioners to lobby for something for that client, that is not okay to me. So when we talk about best practices, when we talk about efficiencies and transparencies, I think there is more we can do to improve this agency. I think there's more we can do that would be to the benefit of everyone, including the place director, including the IMC, to shield us from criticisms that may or may not be valid, but we produced public records that paint a very frightening picture to me. We have records that say, in court documents that say if you want to get millions of dollars from Blueprint, you can give one commissioner 10%. And then we have text messages that imply that one commissioner, at least to him, felt he had a very influential ability to pick who would delegate some of these dollars and make recommendations. All of that, to me, is concerning. So the improvements I think we can make is looking how we make sure these hiring decisions, how we make sure these decisions where we can allocate $500,000 through a competitive leveraging fund, those decisions are made openly in the public. And I think we can, as a board, decide we want to make all of these things that may or may not be delegated to the IMC, but are of great public importance. We require them to be done in public meetings and ask the IMC to publicly meet to discuss them so people can follow a paper trail. So that will be my recommendation for the agency. I respect the input we've heard from the Citizens for Ethics Reform, Commissioner Porter and Attorney Dawson's opinion, but broadly, there's an easy way to answer that question. The attorney generals often give boards, if there's any indication that something's not under sunshine, that's where we go as elected officials to read, opinions from the attorney general to just see what's right and what's not. So I think maybe it's CYA, but I think it would be good to let's just ask the Attorney General to issue an opinion on sunshine of the IMC, and then we can have something to stand behind if we do face criticism. And that, Mr. Chair, it's end of my comments, but I would like, well, if there's any more discussion on that, I would make a motion that we ask the Attorney General, but if there's any further discussion.
I have Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you. I really want to make a motion to adjourn because we have exhausted the agenda that was presented to us and prepared for us. So I make that motion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, not everyone had a chance to speak.
I can do my job. I got it. Madam Attorney, I don't think you can make a motion to adjourn. If I'm not mistaken, the adjournment is the prerogative of the chair, correct?
Motion to adjourn can be made. Let me check. Motion to adjourn needs a second. There's no debate on it. It cannot be amended, and it has to pass by majority.
Simple majority? Simple?
Yes, Commissioner.
Motion's been made to adjourn by Commissioner Williams-Cox. It's been seconded by the Vice Chair. There is no discussion on the item. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Roll call.
Mayor Daley? Aye. Commissioner Matlow?
Nay.
Commissioner Porter?
Nay.
Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Aye.
Commissioner Cummings? Commissioner Dozier?
No.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Commissioner Minor?
No.
Commissioner Welch?
No.
Commissioner Maddox?
Aye.
With 2 out of the room, the motion passes. Weighted vote, 31 to 29.
We adjourn.
Wow.